Hello, this is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here to talk about the best recordings of Stravinsky's Les Noces, the wedding, Svadebka. And in this particular case, I actually like calling it Svadebka in Russian. I prefer the original. Robert Kraft, who I knew casually, always insisted on calling it Svadebka. And there's a reason for it, and it has to do really with the essence of the work and identifying it for what it really is. And so I think that's worth discussing first so that we understand where we are going into it. Now, as you may know, the wedding was composed in the 19-teens and early 1920s, and it gave Stravinsky a big headache in terms of the arrangement. Initially, he wanted to write it for an enormous orchestra, then he wanted to write it for mechanical instruments, and then he finally settled on a remarkable ensemble of 4 pianos and percussion, along with solo voices and a small chorus. And that ensemble had huge repercussions in 20th century music. For example, Bartók's Sonata for 2 pianos and percussion, and a lot of the writing in his first piano concerto would never have been possible without Stravinsky's Les Noces as an earlier example. Carl Orff made his whole career out of the piece. He copied the ensemble of 4 pianos and percussion exactly in his Catulle Carmina, and in one form or another, just about everything he did afterwards. I mean, George Crumb, who has made a huge career out of writing works that involve pianos and percussion alone. So the ensemble was a very, very important decision on Stravinsky's part. But more important than that is why he chose the ensemble for this piece and what it really is. Now, the music for Les Noces sounds extremely mechanical. It really does. You hear it, and I mean, it sounds sort of like Carl Orff, like, Carmina Burana, but it's pure rhythm, a lot of chanting, Russian folk melodies. The piece has 4 shortish sections that flow into one another. The whole thing only lasts for about 20 minutes, but many consider it to be the most important masterpiece that Stravinsky ever wrote. And Stravinsky himself was inordinately fond of the piece. And the reason is because the reason for its really remarkable setting is that it's not a wedding in the, happy here comes the bride sense of a wedding. It's more a communal ritual. The setting is supposed to be rhythmically rigid. It's supposed to be an expression of the timeless renewal of a community, specifically a peasant community. And that's where the title comes in, Svadebka. Now, the Russian word for wedding is svadba. Svadebka is a diminutive. It's really the little wedding. In other words, it suggests the wedding ritual, the wedding custom, the fact that this is not a big event, but rather something that happens in the ordinary course of the life of the community. And that was what Stravinsky was trying to get at. Apparently, in the choreography, the original choreography of the ballet, the movements were all extremely ritualized, stylized, and rigid. He wanted his audience to understand that what was happening was a timeless, it's similar to the Rite of Spring. Remember, the Rite of Spring was about the renewal of spring, something that happens every year and that is enacted ritually. And so it is with this wedding, and that was the way it was in peasant communities. The wedding was not supposed to be, of course it was a party and you celebrated it, but what was being celebrated was the affirmation of the traditions of the people rather than just a ceremony between 2 individuals who are supposed to be, live happily ever after. Their happiness was not really the point. It was probably an arranged marriage, and it was something designed to preserve assets. It was, the old style wedding. It was as much about, trading the bride for 3 goats and 2 chickens and wheeling and dealing behind the scenes. And then, of course, everybody celebrates the consummation of the wedding because that was the end game in the entire process of ensuring the survival of the peasant community through the mating of a man and a woman. And that's what the music expresses. You don't really need to know what's being said, although the Russian is unusually simple and clear. It's set syllabically for the most part, and it's done in a way that allows for tons and tons and tons of repetition. And so the piece itself is an odd combination of extreme simplicity and unbelievably sophisticated means of expression. And by setting the whole thing just for 4 pianos and percussion, Stravinsky takes it as far away from normal vocal melody, even though it's using folk tunes throughout, as he possibly can. It places the whole piece at one remove from the listener. It's a what they call a Verfremdungseffekt in German. It's an alienation effect. The design is to make sure that you're listening from a distance, that you're watching purely as a ritual act. And his success was incontestable, and it's an incredible work. Now, The Wedding has acquired a reputation, a kind of legendary reputation, because it requires 4 pianos and percussion, and it's sort of a point of honor of great pianists to take the piano parts, or important pianists, important people to take the piano parts, because the piano parts aren't terribly difficult, but it's a festival kind of piece. The problem with Les Noces, and I think the only reason, or Svadebka, and I think the only reason why it's not as popular as The Rite of Spring is, first of all, because it's vocal and it's mostly in Russian, although Stravinsky performed it in French and in English, which gives you some sense of how important he felt the words actually were. But it's only 20 minutes long in one continuous arch, and that's really, when do you do it? You have to get 4 pianos and percussion and 20 minutes and it's over. So it's not an easy piece to program, and it doesn't appear on many regular concerts, which is just a terrible, terrible shame, because it is absolutely one of Stravinsky's very, very, very greatest works. But, for example, if you look at Stravinsky's own recording, which I have here, this is in his Stravinsky edition. The setting is in English. This is the one he did for Columbia. He recorded it more than once. And the pianists are, get this, Samuel Barber, Aaron Copland, Lucas Foss, and Roger Sessions. Now that is quite the layout of pianists, isn't it? The other most famous one, and I have it here, and it's also exceptionally good, by the way, definitely worth, is this one, Leonard Bernstein's, with the English Bach Festival Orchestra and the English Bach Festival Chorus, members of the orchestra. And the pianists are Martha Argerich, Christian Zimmerman, Cyprian Katsaris, and Homero Francesch. I mean, it doesn't get much better than that. And this Bernstein disc is a great, great disc. Now, there have been many, many, many recordings of Les Noces. Most of them are pretty good. The piece does not permit shall we say, a tremendous range of interpretation, which was Stravinsky's idea. He didn't believe music required interpretation. Nonetheless, there are certain things that you look for in great performances. One is clarity of the text. Again, not that you need to know every word, but you need to know that they're saying something and let the music sort of do the rest, if you know what I mean. And also acuity of rhythm and intensity and sort of the driving force of the pulse throughout. There are some performances, such as this one on Hyperion with the New London Chamber Choir and Ensemble, which also uses the Voronezh Chamber Choir to sing Russian peasant songs in between and around the performance of Les Noces, which is very, very interesting. You get to hear actual Russian traditional music with a performance of Les Noces in the middle. Nonetheless, I don't find this to be the best performance of Les Noces. The conductor is James Wood. It's not terrible. The Russian stuff around it is interesting, but I think Les Noces has been done better. I tend to prefer the versions that really hammer home the rhythms and that make the text clear and Russian sounding. You know, you can hear it in French, you hear it in Russian, even in English. You're like, what language are they singing and what does it matter? It should sound somehow Russian. You should hear the Russian syllables coming through it to give it. It gives it a whole different character when that Slavic timbre comes through it, I find. And the best performances you'll see do that. But so I divide my recordings into sort of like the rhythmic virtuoso ones, like the Bernstein, for example, and the more Russian sounding ones, which we'll get to in a minute. So like rhythmic and virtuoso, this one is unbelievable if you can find it still. This is James Levine with the Chicago Symphony Percussion Ensemble and Chamber Chorus, which was trained by Margaret Willis, who's amazing. This is also comes with an unbelievable Petrushka that nobody pays attention to. Also with the Chicago Symphony. This is a terrific record. I mean, this is one of James Levine's best recordings in Chicago, and no one knows about it. So this is a secret, folks. If you can get James Levine doing Petrushka and Les Noces, you've got one hell of a recording. It's astonishing. It really is. Another performance that is really Russian sounding, and this one will shock you, is Robert Kraft on Naxos. I told you he always insisted on calling it Svadebka, and somehow he makes sure that this totally British performance sounds Russian. It really does. I think the reason is because he spends extra time making sure that the words are clear, that you hear that they're singing in Russian, and it gives the piece this wonderful earthiness and this indefinable, powerful character that you don't hear in performances that are more abstract, at least most performances that are more abstract. One where you do hear it in a performance of unbelievable clarity and also like the Levine, but even better sung, it probably is this one. This is on Harmonia Mundi, and it's with the RAIS Kammerchor, conducted by Daniel Royce. Now, as we know, the RAIS Kammerchor is absolutely the ultimate in chamber choirs in the history of the universe. There is nothing they can't sing. They spend their lives doing a lot of very difficult contemporary music, and they are extraordinary. And it's just a stunner to hear them do this music. And it's coupled with Stravinsky's Mass and the cantata, his cantata. And so the performance is wonderful. And the thing that's so cool is that this duplicates exactly the recording which you must own before all others, the one that represents Les Noces, Svadebka, at its most primal and extraordinarily virtuosic and meaningful and intense. And that is, you ready? Angel's. And you get it with the Mass and the cantata. It's the same program, this Angel Superphone recording with Czech forces. The choral singing is just amazing, as it is on Angel's Symphony of Psalms, which is also my reference version for that work. And you get both of them. Get the Harmonia Mundi for the ultimate version of what you can do in the West, and the Angel for the ultimate version of what you can do in the East, in the three exact same works. It's a wonderful opportunity to hear Stravinsky's Svadebka at its absolute best, most powerful, most compelling, and yes, although Stravinsky would hesitate to admit it, most expressive, because that's what this music does. It's the expression of the communal truth of the wedding ritual. That's what it does. And it does it in a way which is so timeless and so extraordinary. So give it a listen with some fresh ears. Think about those things and see what the piece does for you. See if it speaks to you. But I can't recommend those two recordings strongly enough. The Harmonia Mundi with Royce and the Anschel on Superphone, they will rock your world. I guarantee it. Keep on listening, folks. Thank you for joining me. And if you like this chat, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. All the best.